This is long overdue, but I've been wanting to do this series where I just talk about some of the things that I used to teach my students when I was a professor for English composition. And these are all based off of things that I believe what I kind of taught for my students in order to help them critically think. So, the first thing about critically thinking for yourself that I always told my students to understand when it comes to source material as well concepts and opinions and biases is knowing that anything in academia, especially whether I taught or something that is something they're reading, is to always question and to always understand the purpose of those materials. So everything that has been ever written has some kind of purpose, has some kind of audience, and definitely has a sense of bias into what they're presenting. So that means when it comes to biases or any kind of article or thing you're reading, there is going to be some objective. Everything you're going to read is going to have an implicit bias or is going to have a type of objective that is not going to be, explicitly said, but you can tell because of their thesis or what they're trying to argue, promote, or show is going to show what kind of bias or implicit argument they're showing. And everything as far as writing or any kind of study and just like everything that we have has a bias. So if you say that something is completely it has no bias, that's just infactually true. Everything theoretical when it comes to psychology, science has been based on a theory because it's been based on a type of bias or a certain argument or something that somebody is trying to prove. The only way that things become fact is when you've had enough evidence to disprove which is not fact and which is actually true. So knowing that, and a lot of the things of what I see online, which is very annoying and which is also really telling to me that people don't actually critically think to themselves, is how much they believe things when it comes from somebody who has a potential degree or something that is like saying like psychology says, or this person with a PhD said this, so I somehow believe that they're right. It doesn't matter. Something that has been a great lesson for me that I learned from my biology professor is that he literally said to us, do not believe and do not wholeheartedly believe anything even your professors say, because they could be wrong and they could have biases or certain intentions. You should always question for yourself, because it tests how much people believe just because of word of mouth and what somebody's degree or authority can have so much power to somebody's knowledge. He tested it out, telling us that one day in class when he was talking about the moon, he said that the moon is made of cheese, and that he was, to his amazement, saw how so many students just have kind of doubting faces, but just start to write it down and start to think that's true instead of questioning him. So you should always question somebody's bias, somebody's opinion, somebody's point of view. And even if you don't agree with it, questioning is part of critical thinking. Personally, when it comes to critically thinking, a lot of it comes with intersectionality and understanding of different perspectives and knowing the neutrality when it comes to decision making and looking at many different perspectives. When it comes to education, and the way I taught is that I would bring both perspectives, or against. And the point of my students or their education or whether I ask them to write is which side do you necessarily agree with more and why. And so critically thinking isn't, and when you say you agree with something, that doesn't mean you full-heartedly agree, nor should you. When it comes to any kind of fact or opinion, especially anything that's theoretical or anything in psychology, that whole field is based off of theories, and it's only just recently, I don't know how people keep forgetting, just recently been more developed and more studies on neurodiversity and people who are neurodivergent, when years and years and years, like literally I would say maybe up to like the last, somebody needs to actually cite this for me, but within the last like 5 years, we've just stopped putting people into institutions and just putting them away without actually dealing or studying their neurodiversity and their neurotypes, finding actual solutions. So if you want to critically think for yourself, you need to look at different sources. And different sources mean not just TikTok. This is where you can get a lot of opinions and a lot of perspectives. But once you got a general opinion or perspective from social media or things that are easily digestible, that's when you have to look into actual resources and sources and studies to see the validity of those opinions. The next thing I'm going to talk about later in, I guess, another series is the types of sources that are more considered, like that have more validity, that really holds more evidential support, is when it's peer reviewed, and why that's super important.